How does a $600 gaming PC sound to you guys right now? If it sounds good, you came to the right place because that is exactly what we are building today. If any of you guys have tried buying or selling something online, then you know how much of a headache it can be. People constantly lowballing you or trying to scam you. Well, with today's sponsor, you don't have to deal with that crap ever again. Jawa.gg is the one and only marketplace to buy and sell gaming gear and PC builds from real gamers. It was actually founded by a group of gamers in the first place who were sick of dealing with scammers or scalpers. So they decided there had to be a better way. Here are some of the great deals on Jawa right now if you're building a new PC. Like this RTX 2080 Founders Edition that's going for $309. This card normally goes for over $350 on eBay. There's also a Ryzen 9 3900X going for $230 and a refurbished GMMK keyboard for $50. But if you don't feel like building a PC, a great way to get into PC gaming is by buying one of their custom PCs from boutique builders. Like this awesome $900 gaming system that features a Ryzen 7 3700X and an RTX 2070 Super. Right now, all new buyers can get $10 off their first purchase using the code TechsourceJawa. So if you guys have been wanting to save money on your PC parts and get a $10 discount, make sure to check out their website, which I'll link down below. You guys really enjoyed my $1,000 PC build I uploaded last month, so let's keep it going. This is a very nice entry-level gaming PC for 1080p, high settings. It's gonna look good, and it's gonna cost less than $600 at the time of making this video. So starting with the CPU choice, I went with Intel once again. This is the Core i3-12100F. It's a quad-core, 8-thread CPU that supports DDR5 memory, which is nice if you decide to make the jump to that platform later down the line. You already have a CPU that's going to support that. For $106, this CPU does very well in gaming, even when compared to the Ryzen 7 3700X, which is a $325 8-core 16-thread CPU. And because it has a TDP of 89 watts, it doesn't have a high power draw, meaning it's going to be very easy to cool, so that's why we are sticking with the stock cooler, which is more than enough to keep the temps down. For the motherboard, we're going with the Gigabyte H610M S2H that I picked up for $80. This is the absolute minimum that we can get away with within this price point. It's got all the features that we need to get the PC up and running, and honestly, that's all you can ask for around $80. Now, if you want a higher quality board and you don't mind paying a little bit more, I recommend the MSI Pro B660M instead for $110. You get 2 more DIMM slots, an extra M.2 slot, better VRM coverage, and onboard USB-C. Now for memory, I went with T-Force Vulcans this time because of the value it offers. This is a 16GB kit running at 3600 megahertz with a seal timing of 18 for $45. But here's the thing, the motherboard only supports up to 3200 megahertz. So why did I buy these sticks? Well, that's because the 3200 megahertz kit was only $1 less. So it just made sense paying the extra $1 and getting faster sticks. So we will be running these at 3200 megahertz for the build, but if you do decide to upgrade to a B660 board, like the MSI one I mentioned earlier in the video, you can take advantage of the 3600 megahertz. For storage, you guys already know how we do it here. I don't like tossing anything less than a 1 terabyte drive inside of a budget build, mostly because of how cheap storage is these days. So you can definitely fit in a 1 terabyte, and that's what we're doing today. We're gonna toss in a 1 terabyte from Team Group. This is the MT33, which will provide enough storage for the operating system and the games we're going to be installing on it. Speaking of which, we still have enough budget left over for a CD key. You can pick one up for around $15 on your CD key website. Just use my code TS20 to get that extra discount. They will email you the CD key within minutes, and all you have to do is go into the activation settings of Windows and just activate it. Oh, this is really cool. I didn't know the motherboard comes with some sort of a latch system for the M.2 SSD, so you don't actually have to use any screws. That's pretty cool. Okay, so before I put the cooler on, I'm actually gonna do something a little different. I'm gonna wipe off the thermal paste from the CPU and apply my very own, just because I don't trust Intel's crappy thermal paste application. It's not even centered, actually, now that I'm looking at it. So I do have some extra Corsair TM30 from a previous build, so I'm just gonna use this in my own way. I always like to start from the top and then use a spatula to spread it from top to bottom. A nice even spread. Looks like we might need a little bit more. It's always okay to over apply thermal paste than it is to not put enough. Worst case scenario, it starts spilling from the sides, but if you don't apply enough, Worst case scenario, your CPU overheats, so I'm way more comfortable with this thermal paste application. If you guys are ever in a situation where you need to wipe off thermal paste, whether it's from your CPU cooler or from the CPU itself, always use a paper towel with some 99% isopropyl alcohol. I like to fold my paper towel a little bit, just apply one dab. This should be enough to wipe the thermal paste off of it. Look at that, brand new. All right, now with a clean cooler, we just gotta pop this on. Pushing down on the tabs on each corner until we hear a click. And that's how we know the CPU cooler is secured. And then we're gonna plug in the cable to the CPU fan header right on the motherboard, which is usually on the top. It's easy to spot. Make sure the cooler is fully seated. Good to go. Another way to make sure the CPU cooler is fully seated is to look in the back. If all 4 of the pins stick out like this, then you're good to go. So the case we're going with is the Deepcool Matrix 40, and there are a lot of things I love about this case. For starters, you get a very thick tempered side panel. There is a nice power supply shroud on the bottom to help cover the power supply and the cable management, and you get 3 included 120mm fans, you guys. There's 2 in the front for intake and 1 in the back as exhaust. And I paid less than $60 for this. You also get 2 USB ports on the top, one of them being a USB 3, and in the back you have access to a removable hard drive cage that can support up to 2 hard drives or SSDs, but you do have the option of adding 2 more SSDs on the back here, so a total of 4 drives if you want. So there is something I want to mention real quick about the case fans. They are currently daisy chained by a Molex cable. Now there are pros and cons to this. The cons is that you can't control the speed or the RGB effects. So unfortunately, you're stuck with the rainbow puke. But the pros are that it doesn't use up a fan header on your motherboard. And that's a good thing because our motherboard only has 2 fan headers, one of which is being occupied by the CPU cooler. So technically we can only plug in 1 case fan, which is not ideal. But since they are daisy chained with a Molex connector, we can just plug this straight into our power supply and supply power to all the fans. So it works out with this build. As far as the graphics card, I was able to squeeze in an RX 6600 in this budget. But at the time of making this video, it looks like the price dropped to $190, which is unfortunate because had I known, I would have waited a few weeks and saved an extra $20, but that's just how it goes. You know, that's just the nature of doing these PC builds on YouTube. Prices always change. But the RX 6600 is a pretty fast card, and it does so much better than the NVIDIA RTX 3050. In fact, it's 29% faster than the RTX 3050, and it costs a lot less too, making it a very simple choice for this price point. I mean, sure, you don't get ray tracing with DLSS support, but you still get AMD's Fidelity FX, which is very similar upscaling technology. But as expected, the PCI brackets are snap-off only, so we gotta make sure to snap off the correct ones. The easiest way to tell is to align it with the top PCI slot. So here it is. It aligns with the top PCI bracket. It is a 2-slot card, so we're gonna knock off the first and second PCI brackets. Just gotta bend it forward and backward until it eventually snaps off. One thing you guys should be careful about while trying to pop off the PCI bracket is to make sure you're not bending it too much to a point where you're touching the capacitors on the motherboard, because oftentimes when you're bending it too much, it can come in contact with them and those would snap off. See how it's moving already just by touching it slightly? They're very sensitive, so make sure you guys aren't bending it too much. It doesn't really take that much effort actually to pop these off. Okay, now we're gonna grab our graphics card and slide it in the top PCI slot. If you guys are installing a graphics card, always make sure to install it in the first PCI slot on the motherboard to make sure you're not losing out on any extra performance. Once it snaps in place and the tab is fully seated, you're good to go. So powering the entire system is the Aries Gaming power supply. Once again, no surprise here. You guys are gonna see a lot of these power supplies in my budget builds. You just can't beat the reliability and the value that these offer for such a great price. Unfortunately, it is not fully modular, so you're gonna be stuck with the nasty black cable. So if you guys have an extra $25 to spend, I would get some nice cable extensions from Amazon, which I'll link a few below that I recommend. Oh look, it even comes with a power supply tester. Man, it feels good to build budget PCs once again, you guys. Who would have thought that you can play AAA titles well over 100 FPS with just 600 bucks? I mean, we were even seeing well over 200 FPS in some of the competitive titles, which were also in high settings. I was honestly blown away by the performance of this PC. I did not expect it to do this well. It doesn't even draw that much power. I think the total system peaked at 200 watts on full load, but it stayed under 200 watts for the most part while gaming. Temps were also very good. On the most demanding game I've played, which was Warzone 2.0, the CPU peaked at 67 degrees Celsius and the GPU peaked at 56. All the other games had much lower temps, and overall noise of the PC was quiet, capping at 49 decibels. The 3 included RGB fans in here did very well to keep the temps down on all the components, but if you guys want to add more fans to the build, you can technically add 2 more exhaust fans on the top, but personally, I think the fan configuration is perfect as is, and I would rather use that extra money towards some cable extensions. If you guys are planning on building this exact same system, there is one thing you have to do before you start gaming on it. We have to enable the XMP in the BIOS to make sure the memory is running at its max frequency, which will also impact your FPS in games. So once you're in the BIOS, you'll see that the default speed is 2800 megahertz. So all we gotta do is click on the XMP profile, which is right there on the main menu. So after enabling it, you can see 3600 megahertz show up on the XMP profile, which is the same frequency we have on our memory sticks. But as I mentioned earlier, the motherboard supports only up to 3200 megahertz. So what it's doing right now is basically underclocking the memory. So on the top, you can see it's down to 3200 megahertz instead. Afterwards, all you gotta do is hit F10 and save the settings to restart your PC back to desktop. As always, I drop a link to all the parts I used in the build down below if you guys wanna check it out. If you guys are enjoying the budget builds on the channel, do let me know by tossing a like to show your support. But more importantly, let me know in the comment section what budget PC I should build next. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in the next one. What the hell is this? Oh my God. I had the tags on this entire time. That's great.